Well, hello there. Thanks for joining me. I need to warn you that this show is going to be about Germany, and I will be having this show. I will be speaking only in German. So if you don't know German, you may not understand the show. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Germany is on the radar today, and I have a definite conclusion here. This world that they set up for us was organized as one big cult, divided into small groups, right? This religion, this baseball team, that baseball team. Everybody is following a leader at some point, right? So sometimes individuals disagree about whether a group, such as certain religious groups, is actually a cult. Even researchers sometimes can't agree on what constitutes a cult. Most people can agree that cults have a leader, and the leader or group of people who serve as leaders are responsible for the rules that guide the members. According to the Cult Education Institute, there are specific warning signs to look out for. Absolute authoritarianism without accountability. Zero tolerance for criticism or questions. Lack of meaningful financial disclosure regarding budget. Unreasonable fears about the outside world that often involve evil conspiracies and persecutions. A belief that former followers are always wrong for leaving and there is never a legitimate reason for anyone else to leave. Abuse of members. Records, books, articles, or programs documenting the abuses of the leader or group. Followers feeling that they are never able to be good enough. Did you hear that? Followers feel like they're never able to be good enough. Keep that in mind. A belief that the leader is right at all times. A belief that the leader is the exclusive meaning of knowing truth or giving validation. Cults are dangerous because they typically rely on deception and authoritarian practices to make members dependent on and obedient to the group. Cults often cut off members from other forms of social and financial support and pose both physical and psychological risks to members of the group. Why do they join cults? Well, they don't know they're joining a cult to begin with. Most individuals don't recognize the group they're joining is considered a cult. Individuals who are attracted to groups that are considered cults may have certain vulnerabilities that make them much more likely to join, such as anxiety or substance abuse problems. They have unresolved insecurities. Another study found that many cult members experience attachment insecurities prior to joining a cult. Their insecurities may drive them toward a group that promises acceptance. Once they join a group, they're usually distanced from outside influences. After people are separated from the outside world, leaving the group becomes difficult. They often become dependent on being in the group and develop suspicions of anyone outside the group. This is why some people suspect that cult members are brainwashed. I think it's just all the dynamics. What they say is the other major theory about why individuals remain in cults is mostly sociological. Cult members often promise to reward members in some way. They may tell them they're going to move up the ranks and within the cult, or they may convince them that something really good is going to happen to their special group. Well, so far to me at least, this has sounded exactly like corporations are also run, right? Like cults, right? We have all these things divided into other areas. We have corporations, which essentially, my opinion, they behave like a cult. Like, for example, when I worked at Intel, it was run like a military organization. They had Every corporation has organizational charts. Everybody has defined duties, just like the military, right? There's a pecking order. You don't get out of line from where your group goes, right? You stay within your class group within that organizational chart, which could also reasonably be argued as a cult, right? You draw a lot of allegiance to your corporate overlords, right? They talk to you in militaristic terms. I remember at Intel, the big enemy in the chip business was always AMD. So Intel was always coming up with these warlike things. They had meetings in war rooms, they called them, to strategize over how to get rid of their competition, meaning AMD, another chip manufacturer. They actually at one point hung posters around our offices saying things like loose lips sink ships, meaning stop talking outside of our corporation, right? Loose lips sink chips, they said. The real slogan should be loose lips sink ships, right? But they just flipped it and said loose lips sink chips. That was an obedient way that they were telling us how to behave, right? I started out looking into cults. That was how I first got started years and years ago. I became suspicious about cults. And because I've already talked about it, I'm not going to go into it in detail. But I finally figured out, I started looking into cults around the 80s. And I didn't look into psychopaths until the 90s because I finally figured out that these cults were run by psychopaths. But I was looking at more standard cults, right? More things we think about being cults. It was a religious group. So I was thinking, well, this is likely a cult, right? But what I wasn't looking at was the corporate structure that I was also engaging in when I took a corporate job. That also had a lot of similarities to a cult. Corporations always try to tell you you didn't get it good enough. Go back, do it again. Come back when you get it right. You want that promotion, don't you? That is how a cult operates. And obviously, I found a piece that said famous examples of cults. And you'll also notice that these examples include cults run as psyopses, okay? These cults, like Manson and them, were cults that were created by the CIA. I am here to say I believe that early on they started breaking this all up into cults. And also, I have some information today. I have skipped over a major, major piece. Back in Germany, what did we have in Germany? Well, we had the Weimar Republic. For some reason, I glazed over the Weimar Republic. So let's take a very close look today. What was the Weimar Republic about, you ask? Well, it was about sex. It was about all kinds of things, cross-dressing, all kinds of things. And the people in the Weimar Republic sound exactly to a T like our friends, these psychopath pilgrims. They ran the Weimar Republic. And some feel, and I'm one of those people, that the Weimar Republic was really a run up to what was being done today. This is how it works. They set up these things to test us. And I have all kinds of reasons to believe that this all got started in Germany. Why people become cult leaders is also not well understood. Some experts suggest that cult leaders tend to be psychopaths. They're often charismatic and use psychological tactics to gain power, social control, and allegiance from their followers. Sounds like any corporate executive I ever dealt with. There have been many cults that have made the news, quite often for their tragic endings. Then we have Charles Manson. I talked about Charles Manson in the past. In my show was about true crimes are all psyopses. And also, when I did the show about Charles Manson, Kenny, remember, it was in the last few years, but George Bush, when I did that show, I found an old clip of George Bush sounding just like Charles Manson. This is an actor-based reality we're living in, okay? So they do these psyopses to also present us what the score is, right? And we have, for some reason, had a lot of examples of cults. Okay, just saying. Okay, just hang in here. This will start to make a lot more sense in a bit here. And just as a side note, I will only be speaking today for about an hour, so it may go into a second session. So there's that. Okay, so in the 1960s, Charles Manson assembled a group of young people and referred to them as his family. How often do you hear corporations refer to the workers as family members? I hear people on YouTube and stuff saying that, hello, my YouTube family. You know, when people say that to me, I gotta say, I resist it at every level. I just want to scream, you are not my family. Stop calling me your family. They always want to drag us into this thing like, well, yeah, everybody's crazy, everybody lies, everybody cheats, everybody's a psychopath, we're all the same. No, we are not. We've got to start separating ourselves from this stuff. So he referred to them as his family. Manson expressed his ideas about an imminent race war, and he told his followers he wanted them to go on a killing spree. One night in 1969, several followers murdered 5 people. Of course, it's 5. They love that number 5, including actress Sharon Tate. Manson was later convicted of first-degree murder. Of course, that was all fake, okay? And I've talked about Jim Jones in the past being a cult. Jim Jones founded the People's Temple in Indianapolis in 1955. And Jim Jones was also a CIA asset. Okay, so these cults were started by the CIA. So you start to see where this could be going here? He moved his followers to Eureka, California out of fear that a nuclear attack might strike Indiana. He later moved his followers to Guyana to an area which became known as Jonestown. When officials went to investigate the group in 1978, after the government grew concerned that some members were being abused, the group shot and killed the official. Jones then instructed his followers to drink flavor-laced Kool-Aid with cyanide. Over 900 people died. Well, I'm not going to go into that whole case again, but part of the plot from Jones getting all those people to head off to Guyana with him, they were going to be doing some major different industries in that area. And my belief, you can have your own, but I believe a large part of the reason was to get all of those cult members there as free labor. This is all a game of how to get us to work for free, and cults fit into that environment, right? So if they don't want to pay us to work in a corporation, they get us to go in a cult, and there we can work for free. It's all about abusing our labor. So let's talk a little bit about the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic came about after World War I and before World War II. And remember, World War I supposedly was ended by the Treaty of Versailles that they signed in the room called the Hall of Mirrors, okay? So, the Weimar Republic was the government of Germany from the end of World War I until the election of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. It held hope and promise for a new era of democracy and stability. Yet from the start, Weimar was besieged by extremism from both the left and the right, as well as a deep financial crisis. Weimar Republic was about the rise of Nazis, also hyperinflation, collapse. The basis of German prosperity in the late 1920s was precarious, as it was largely dependent on foreign credits. When these dried up and the loans already made were called in, Germany was plunged into a slump more severe than it experienced by any other country. Why was the Weimar Republic unpopular from the start? The Weimar Republic was created at a time of confusion and chaos. And remember, These people, part of their creed is to rule by chaos. So the Weimar Republic was created at a time of confusion and chaos after Germany had lost World War I. Many Germans felt their country had received a very harsh deal in the Treaty of Versailles. They resented the government for agreeing to its conditions and signing it, even though they were forced to by the Allies. So it was Germany's government from 1919 to 1933, the rise of Nazi Germany. It was named after the town of Weimar, where Germany's new government was formed by a national assembly after Kaiser Wilhelm abdicated. Excuse me. Okay, so in its 14 years in existence, the Weimar Republic faced numerous problems, including hyperinflation, political extremism, and contentious relationships with the victors of the First World War, leading to its collapse during the rise of Adolf Hitler. And don't forget, Adolf Hitler was being played by no other than Walt Disney. I've talked about this so much in the past, I could almost go blind, but Walt Disney played Adolf Hitler, a man who left behind some valuable work, nailed it, okay? A lot of what we're doing now is off the backs of people who left a lot of good things in my path that I've been able to uncover. I owe a great deal of gratitude for all of these bloggers out there who have been writing away on all of this stuff. Sadly, most of these bloggers are totally ignored by the YouTube crowd and the social media crowd because they don't want these sneaky little details getting into their way, right? They prefer to do their research based on what other people have produced in videos. So they just copy and paste from each other. We're living in the middle of a copy and paste environment. So yes, I am extraordinarily thankful for all of the help that I'm getting, both from those on the other side who are helping me greatly. They're very kind to me. They know when I've had enough, and they keep coming back with more and more excellent information. And they're getting all this information from the kind people who wrote all these blogs, the people who wrote these books, people who dug through these Freedom of Information Acts. This is who we owe all of this information to today. Those people who dug through all this stuff. They didn't become losers on social media pumping out shows and stuff. They were over there doing the actual work. Here again, two sides, right? We got a group of people over there really hunting stuff down and writing, and we got a group of people over there just spewing lies on their video shows, right? So what were the problems? The Weimar Republic had to sign the humiliating peace treaty of Versailles. The peace treaty had demanded Germany to follow many terms. Germany losing its overseas colonies. The Republic carried the burden of war guilt and was financially crippled by being forced to pay compensations. This flood of money led to hyperinflation. So what they did was they started printing money. Weimar was the first example of massive printing of money. I think you will start to observe a lot of patterns here from Weimar, from what is going on right now, okay? And you'll find out even more in a minute here. So they flooded the market with money, okay? And that led to hyperinflation. As the more money was printed, the more prices rose. Gee, this sounds so familiar right now. Huh. You know, this is a cut and paste operation. And the facts are this. Their existing group of people aren't smart enough to do most of this stuff, okay? They have had to, this group that was running the Weimar Republic and all the tricks they were pulling, much smarter group than the group running things now, okay? They have taken their own intelligence level down 100 notches. I don't want to get too far into it, but all of their own people are the people you see on YouTube with big followings, right? I was watching this attorney the other day, got famous on YouTube for being an attorney. Naturally, he's a liar, right? Says he came from working class, really came from a very wealthy Houston family, okay? Just a total loser, okay? Shows up, goes on podcast. He records himself live streaming so drunk he can hardly speak. There's a woman allegedly giving him excuse my French, a blowjob while he's live streaming live on YouTube. These are the kids that these people raised, okay? None of them appear happy to me. They all appear pathetic. All of them are on drugs, the alcohol, the raping of the children. Be careful who you fear, right? Because people are in fear of these people. And I'm here to say that fear is compliance. If we sit around and think, oh, what are they going to do to me? Well, that is in fact compliance. Imagine this. Imagine if when I discovered that they were setting up transformers around my house, hooking up my smart meter, I could have hid that from everybody, right? I could have not said a word. Why would I do that? Well, because if I didn't say anything, I probably wouldn't be sitting here with lung cancer now, would I? So people react in a lot of ways over the basic fears of death and also over money. If I don't go along, I won't get the big bucks like the rest of them. They show us all these people with all this money. Monkey see, monkey do, right? Hey, they have all that money. They live in expensive houses. Why can't that be me? Be careful what you ask for. I don't believe for a second that all those people online that say they live in those big houses and they have all these money and all this stuff, I don't believe that that is all theirs. They are being controlled for the money. You don't think they're possibly paying somebody a percentage of all that YouTube money they're getting? It is set up like a mafia system and has been since the very beginning. And now we're just in the final cut and paste is all it is. So the flood of money led to the hyperinflation. Well, imagine that. Prices ran out of control. For example, a loaf of bread, which cost 250 marks in January 1923, has risen to 200 million marks. So it went from 250 marks to 200,000 million. I can't even read it, million marks. Okay, it went up. So basically, the people themselves were the ones getting screwed, right? So the treaty also punished Germany militarily, territorially, and financially. Many Germans felt their country had received a harsh deal. But Weimar society was quite forward thinking for the day, with education, cultural activities, and liberal attitudes flourishing. On the other hand, weaknesses such as social political strife, economic hardship, and resulting moral decay plagued Germany during these years. So, why was Germany so plagued by decaying morals and economic hardship and social political strife? Well, because in the 1920s, they started showing us these flapper girls on this side of the country. In the United States, they introduced this idea in the 20s with new magazines appealing to young German women, and it was all about advertising. The images were to display the girl, the flapper. She was young and fashionable. Well, that flapper girl was also transgender, to put that into our heads, because women were more modest up until that time. The flappers brought in all this nuttiness, right? It started in Germany. What else started in Germany? Well, the Frankfurt School, also known as the Institute for Social Research, was founded at Goethe, Goethe University in Frankfurt in 1923. During the Weimar Republic, right? It was a group of intellectuals, academics, and political dissidents who were dissatisfied with things. They proposed that existing social theory was unable to explain the turbulent times, and they had an answer, right? So I went over to GPT and started asking some questions about, did the Frankfurt School, I always call them the Franklin School, excuse me, but did the Frankfurt School, I did a show about the Frankfurt School. That was where they did all of our modeling for how we would do things. And they said, it's important to note that the Frankfurt School did not push business and society to run like a cult. Instead, they applied Marxism to a radical interdisciplinary social theory. They used basic Marxist concepts to analyze the social relations within capitalistic economic society systems. This approach, known as critical theory, yielded influential critiques of large corporations and monopolies, the role of technology, the industrialization of culture, and the decline of the individual within capitalist society. Did you hear that? The decline of the individual within capitalist society. So then it went on to say, so while the Frankfurt School had a significant influence on social theory and critique, it did not advocate for society or businesses to operate like a cult. Instead, it sought to understand and critique the existing structures and systems. And I asked another question. I said, are you sure it's not a cult? I said, some companies act like cults. And they said, yes, you're correct. Some companies can exhibit cult-like behaviors. This typically happens when an organization develops an intense shared commitment to a belief or objective. It is important to note that it isn't inherently negative. For example, many successful companies have strong organizational culture that can contribute to a sense of belonging and purpose among employees. However, problems can arise when the culture becomes extreme or harmful. This can include overwork, groupthink, a lack of diversity of thought, or an excessive focus on a charismatic leader. These are some of the characteristics that people might refer to when they describe a company as being cult-like. Well, yes, because everybody thinks the same, right? You don't go into a corporate meeting and start spewing a bunch of garbage. You stick to the company line or you're going to get run out of town. So, and you definitely, when that leader, president, whatever you're calling them, enters the room, everybody bows down, right? You feel graced by their presence, right? They are the chosen one within the corporation. And it went on to say, yes, you're right again. Some cults can have structures that resemble corporate organizations. This is often because both types of entities need to manage resources, make decisions, and coordinate the actions of many individuals. In a corporate organization, there's typically a clear hierarchy with a CEO or board of directors at the top making strategic decisions. So, similarly, a cult might have a charismatic leader at the top who sets the group's direction and makes key decisions. There may be a hierarchy of followers who have different roles and responsibilities, and there could be subgroups within the cult that focus on different activities. Yes, many times when I was working at Intel for those few years, we were called into groups. We were called into war rooms to talk about competitive strategy, just like you would if you're organizing a war. So, and they said that, however, it's important to note the dynamics may be different. Yes, of course they're different because in corporations, at some point, you get in your car and you drive home before you return back to your cult the next morning, right? If you're in a real cult, you may live on the property. So they say cults, on the other hand, can also be characterized by manipulation, exploitation, and disregard for the well-being of their members. Well, sounds exactly like an American corporation, right? So they say that corporate organizations are typically established with a clear business purpose, such as providing a product or service and generating profit for shareholders. Cults, on the other hand, are often formed around a set of beliefs or the charismatic authority of a leader. No, cults are set up to harm children, to destroy society, to rob people of their money. Cults also have specific things that they're doing, right? All of these cults like to rape children, right? That is a specific thing that they're doing under the charismatic authority of that leader, right? And then they also say corporations are usually required to be transparent about their operations, especially if they are publicly traded. They have to publish annual reports, hold shareholder meetings, and comply with various laws and regulations. Cults are often characterized by lack of transparency, with information tightly controlled by the leadership. So I think that they have a very direct parallel between the cults. And remember, I will be talking about this in a minute. Under the Lutherans, they set up this duality part, right? Duality meaning like republics, Democrats, every country talks about the left side, the right side, right? I'm now seeing corporations and cults as a duality. Yeah, they just formed two groups for us to hang out with. Some of us were more attracted to corporations. Other people had different needs and joined cults. Simple as that. So, why? Because I've also talked in the past, because today I'm going to be talking about all the things I find suspicious about Germany. Remember, I talked about those Ashkenazi Jews. They were really the pilgrims, they just were under the name of Ashkenazis, right? So they said in the late 18th or 19th centuries, Jews who remained in or returned to historical German lands experienced a cultural reorientation. So they said that what they did when they got back together again, as well as the intellectuals and cultural ferment in urban centers, some gradually abandoned Yiddish in favor of German and developed new forms of Jewish religion lives and cultural identity. So they claim that they ran from, they ran over to Israel, all those lies, but that got discovered by those DNA kits, right? So they say that they had to be they got rid of Yiddish in favor of German. So why was that, right? And developed new forms of Jewish religious life and cultural identity. Yeah, they did develop a lot of new lives now, didn't they? There was this quote that I read. It said, "The decay of moral values in all areas of life, the period of deepest German degradation, coincided exactly with the height of Jewish power in Germany." Because what's happening here, a lot of people are seeing these pilgrims as the Jews, right? Because they were running under the name of the Jews at that time. But please don't be like everybody on social media. When I post these stories, when I post a new show over on YouTube, why I don't know, but anyway, I do. And I don't know, people will drop into the comments and they haven't listened to the show. They don't know what the show was about. And it'll be a show about the show I did about the pilgrims. And they will drop into the comments and say, "No, it's the Jews." And that's all they'll say. And somebody else will say, "Yeah, it's the Jews." So everybody has the Jews on blind repeat. Please, let's not be part of that crowd. Okay, well, let's keep these people straight. So, what else happened during this time of decline? So, it was the Jews, and I'll just call them the Jews, but I really call them the pilgrims. But I'm old, I'm tired, I don't want to keep screwing with these words, okay? It was the Jews who introduced this pornographic art form to Germany. So the Jews introduced pornography to Germany, a debased genre completely unknown before the Great War. And so it is the Jews who can be held responsible for the general decline in morals. So, yeah, they're bringing up all these things that they claim the Jews did against Germany, right? They didn't have this pornography and these sexologists before this. They had been making up all of this sex stuff because once they made up the horrible sex acts, then they could get people to do them, and then they could assign them to being a sin. So then you could go around doing these horrible things and you could get abdicated for your sin. And it just started this whole crazy system, right? So the Jewish sexologist Ivan Bloch and Magnus Hirschfeld became the representatives of sex research, camouflaged as science, a bogus science that was merely an excuse for pornography and propaganda. Remember propaganda, that word, pagan, and propaganda designed to destroy the institute of marriage and the sanctity of the family. That's exactly what this is all about. So then these people go on to back up their claim. In 1931, over 60% of German films were produced by Jews, and 82% of the film scripts were written by Jewish writers, though Jews made up less than 1% of the Jewish population. Okay, so now we're coming into some information we can dig into, right? So clearly, at this time in Germany, 1% of the population. That's kind of suspicious to me, right? That 1% again, right? A quick look at the names of directors, producers, stage managers, actors, scriptwriters, and critics revealed everywhere an overwhelming predominance of Jews. A cursory survey of the film titles shows us that the Jews had one thing on the brain: sex. Here are some typical titles: Morals and Sensuality, What is the Price of Love, When a Woman Loses Her Way with Prostitution, The Book of Vices. Finally, there was the rich field of sexology, a new science consisting largely of dubious case histories purporting to reveal the depraved sexual habits of various anonymous patients. In order to give us an air of academic respectability and erudite to these masturbatory fantasies, thrilling adventure stories involving necrophilia, bestiality, and handkerchief fetishism, the more exciting details were often given in vulgar Latin in order to exclude the lay reader. However, it was not long before the Latin was diligently translated into the vernacular for the benefit of the unlatinized lay reader, thus defeating the purpose of the prim schoolmaster's Latin. So yeah, at first they said, oh yeah, we'll just hide this in Latin, but that wasn't really what the plan was, right? So this person reels off a long list of Jewish sexologists who he claims were the forefront of writing such salacious treaties that were no more than pornography masquerading as science. And also during this time, remember they did the thing in the United States during World War II. They wrote that horribly pornographic book that was put off by the financed by the Rockefellers. That was that they masturbated children and stuff for that book. I'll keep reading. These were the star writers in this field. Their books were read avidly today. Their books are still read avidly today by a gullible public hungry for the details of the bizarre, the kinky, and the perverse. So these books were allegedly supposed to be scientific treatises, their ostensible purpose being to educate the broad masses about the dangers of sexual excesses. Under the guise of science, however, they speculated in the lust and lower instincts of their audience. Criminals, prostitutes, and homosexuals took center stage in their repertoire. One looks in vain for any known non-Jewish sexist scientist. So this person also points out that masturbation, remember this country was so obsessed by masturbation, those Kellogg's, I covered them a few years ago. They were obsessed by the people that started Kellogg's cornflakes. They were also obsessed by masturbation. Part of this whole deal is if you withhold information about the body and make sex a crime, then people they'll engage in it before they really know what's going on, right? That's how you can get to rape more children, right? You don't let them really know that it's rape, right? You got to sneak up on them, right? That's how sneaky psychopaths operate. So they point out that masturbation, hitherto a hole in the corner vice, began to be shamelessly promoted for the first time in Weimar Germany by Jewish-run organizations. He also mentions Dr. Max Hodan, Jewish medical officer for Berlin, and ticks him off for circulating a booklet recommending a regular masturbation for the working classes. So, and then also, I think this is about, I was also looking at some of the movies. It was in Weimar, Germany, long before Hannibal Lecter, that the serial killer was to become an iconic figure, a source of secret fantasies and frissions. It is worth noting that one of the world's worst serial killers, Peter Kürten, committed all of his crimes in Germany during the 1925 to 1930 period. This was, of course, the heyday of the Weimar Republic, when the German people lay completely under Jewish domination and when the first dress rehearsal for the later sexual revolution of the 1960s was arguably being run. So, they said the first dress rehearsal for the later sexual revolution of the 1960s was arguably being run. Significantly, when asked what his primary motive for murder was, Curtin replied, "To strike back at an oppressed society." This was a society in which the serial killer was to become a popular icon, enough to create a whole genre of sensational sex crime literature. British historian Sir Arthur Bryant describes throngs of child prostitutes outside the doors of the great Berlin hotels and restaurants. He adds, most of them, the nightclubs and vice resorts, were owned and managed by Jews. And it was the Jews among the promoters of this trade who were remembered in after years. He described throngs of child prostitutes outside the doors of the great Berlin hotels and restaurants. Arriving in Berlin during the hyperinflation crisis of 1923, Klaus Mann, a son of the great German novelist Thomas Mann, remembered walking past a group of dominatrixes. Some of them looked like fierce Amazons, strutting in high boots made of green, glossy leather. One of them brandished a supple cane and leered at me as I passed by. "Good evening, madame," I said. She whispered in my ear, "Want to be my slave? Costs only $6 billion in a cigarette." So, children turned tricks in the railway station. A group of 14-year-old Russian girls, refugees from the Red Terror in Stalin's communist slaughterhouse, managed to make a lucrative living in Berlin as dominatrixes. Little girls were freely available for sex not only in child brothels and pharmacies, but could be ordered by telephone and delivered to clients by taxis, like takeaway meals. Particularly bizarre were mother and daughter teams offering their services to the same clientele simultaneously. This person wrote, one French journalist, Jean Gautier, described in a sickly pornographic detail the creeping horror of feeling a 9-year-old girl's tiny but proficient fingers stroking his upper thigh while the broken-toothed mother covered his face with hot, sucking kisses. Without Jewish money and influence, such a world would never have come into being. Nor was there anything the Germans could do to extricate themselves from this artificially created hothouse of erotomania and sexual deviance in which they now found themselves ensnared. There were no fewer than 17 different prostitute types in this Jew-created brothel city, 8 outdoor types and 9 indoor ones, each with their own specialties and slang terminology. The Europeans, they describe the Saturnalian, and remember they're from Saturn, right? The European describes the Saturnalian scene in the tangels or sleazy bordellos of sex-crazed Berlin in the early 20s in this thing called the Golden Age of the Jews. I saw pimps offering anything to any boy. Little boys, little girls, robust young men, libidinous women, animals. The story went the rounds that a male goose whose neck you cut at just the right ecstatic moment would give you the most delicious frisson of all, as it allowed you to enjoy sodomy, bestiality, homosexuality, necrophilia, and sadism in one stroke. Gastronomy, too, as one could eat the goose afterwards. I don't know. These people are, this is very, I never thought at my age I'd be sitting around sharing my work and having to be describing such horrific things, but this is what it is. In October 1923, when $1 could buy 4.2 billion marks and 6 wheelbarrows of banknotes could barely buy a loaf of bread, it was said that the most exquisite blowjob to be had in Berlin never cost an American tourist more than 30 cents. Even the Rome of the Sistois had never known such orgies as the pervert balls of Berlin, where hundreds of men costumed as women and hundreds of women as men danced under the benevolent eyes of the police. In the collapse of all values, a kind of madness gained hold. Young girls bragged proudly of their perversion. To be 16 and still under suspicion of virginity would have been a disgrace. So, um, they said that the Germans were to be the initial guinea pigs of these cultural markets, all of them initially Jewish, apart from the Habermas. So, yeah, they said it was George Lukacs, one of the founding fathers of the Frankfurt School, who had called for a culture of pessimism and a world abandoned by God. And it was one of their most fantastic ideologists who said he wanted to turn the world upside down and make life a hell on earth. They said that. He said he wanted to turn the world upside down and make life a hell on earth. And here were his exact words. We must organize the intellectuals and use them to make Western civilization stink. Only then, after they have corrupted all its values and made life impossible, can we impose the dictatorship of the proletariat. With Jewish intellectuals like this at the helm, doing their utmost to promote moral anarchy and create an Orwellian dystopia, is there any wonder that the Germans went helter-skelter down the slippery road that ended up where they did? In America, the cultural Marxists were to apply a variation of their Weimar techniques, but refined and honed to a high degree. This time, they would use multiculturalism as a weapon of mass destruction in addition to moral corruption. They would flood the country with immigrants, legal as well as illegal. They would turn race against race, parent against child, and man against woman. Above all, they would teach the non-white races to regard the white race as the ultimate evil, the cancer of human society, to quote the Jewish feminist Susan Sontag. The above comments are admittedly controversial and will elicit anger in many quarters. For this, I apologize. My purpose is simply to give voice to an urgent and widespread perception. What did the cultural Marxists learn from Weimar Germany? They learned that the sexual revolution, in order to succeed, had to be a slow and gradual process. Modern forms of subjecthood the Frankfurt School had learned are marked by mildness. Weimar had failed because the pace had been too frantic. People were aware they were being corrupted. That was fatal. To corrupt a nation effectively, one must make sure that the descent into degradation is an infinitely slow and imperceptible process, one minuscule step at a time, just as those who wish to cook frogs alive in a saucepan, reducing them to a state of comatose stupor. They are advised to place them in cold water and boil them to death as slowly as possible. I'm going to be closing this off. We're right about the hour point. I have a lot to say about Germany, and what I find that with this, lung cancer and stuff is that I tend to run out of energy, but I'm not running out of energy as far as work, how much work I can do. It's just the talking part. This is how they don't understand us, because when they set out to focus on my house and me to get rid of me, right? Well, they didn't understand what they were doing, right? Because they figured that they would cripple me and I would just get sick and die, right? Never know who killed me, right? Well, I know who killed me, so I took action. I moved into a room so I could keep existing, right? So the bizarre part of all this was that even though I may be dying, they didn't stop me from doing my work, right? They actually increased my workload. Because what happened was when I realized I was getting sick, and I realized I'd been had, I decided to move over and get away from YouTube and just do audio so I could focus, so I could do more work, so I wouldn't have to produce video shows, so I could just keep rolling along. So because they made me so sick was the reason I decided to move from YouTube, because I saw that I'd be able to do more work if I wasn't bogged down. Because the whole idea was to share my work as I went along. Sharing my work doing videos took a lot of time, a lot of money, and all that kind of stuff. And because I was getting sick, that propelled me to move just to audio, right? Well, just look at how much I've been able to cover just since the last couple, 3 years that I moved to audio. I have been able to cover a tremendous amount of ground, because I'm not encumbered by other things. So being sick has actually helped my work in a very kind of twisted way, because now instead of, when I was out doing things and stuff, I would have, certain hours I would devote to my work during the day, but I had other things that I engaged in, right? But now the only thing I really am able to engage in is looking around, right? So that gave me many, many, many more hours to look further. So because they got me so sick, it helped to propel my work even further. But remember this, they're going to make everybody sick. Make sure you're getting plenty of fresh air. I'll close this off with my little cat study. I have been doing a secret cat study in my house. I have 2 cats left. The dogs didn't do as well with the radiation, but the cats are doing a lot better. And I can tell you, based on my own personal cat study I'm conducting right now, my cats got into something a few months ago and they split up the house. Okay. I don't think cats want to be around each other when they're dying. So what happened was that one cat stayed in here with me. Okay. And the other cat is in the other room. Well, the cat that stayed in here with me is sick. Obviously, they're sick, but she has not been exhibiting things like the other cat has been exhibiting, throwing up and stuff like that. Because I'm able to maintain the cat in here better with this mixture I'm giving her. And so she's not throwing up in here. But the cat in the other room is still having incidents of throwing up because what that means is there's too high a plutonium in the rest of my house. So that's why I moved to specifically this one room. And my cat study has now verified why I did what I did. Because had I remained in the rest of the house, I would have remained in a state of more physical. Because as long as I'm sick, I can keep working, right? But if you're nauseous and all that stuff and the radiation, that definitely makes you not want to work. So anyway, so enough of that. So I'm going to close out for this. I'll try to be back later today or tomorrow, probably tomorrow, but I'll just be breaking this up. It looks to me like it will be a couple, 3 segments, but I want to do it properly and not feel like I'm in a rush to get offline because I'm having trouble breathing. So, but don't worry, when I'm not talking, I'm fine. I mean, it's not great, but it's great in the impact, but I have lots of time to look around. And that's all I really care about. I never cared about any of the rest of that stuff anyway, so it doesn't matter to me. So be safe out there. I will be back when I can.